Okay, so now that we got the drive belt all figured out, what we're going to do now is line up our engine mounts. Take our, again, 9/16 bolts, and there's 4 of them for each corner. We're going to bolt up our engine, get that into position. I can hook up my fuel line, and then we'll hook up the throttle choke cable here, again with our little permanent marker there. So now when we bring this back, we know exactly where to put it, right? To line it up so it's in the exact position it was when we took it off. Okay, so I got one of my engine bolts in. That one's just a little bit snug, and then the other one there, I got it in, but I'm leaving it a little loose. So now I'm going to go to the other side, get the other 2 on that side tightened up, and then we'll go ahead and torque all of them, because you don't want them coming loose, guys. What I've done here is just taken a little bit of Loctite. Now, if you guys are going to be using Loctite on your engine mounting bolts, I highly suggest using blue. I don't recommend using red because you might have to, you know, pull your engine off. But if we fire it up and it leaks oil, I want to have to take this thing off. And if I use red, it'll be harder than, you know, getting these off with the blue Loctite on them that I have now. Okay, we got our fuel line hooked up and I got it clamped. So now, again, hook up our choke cable. So just take your little end there, plug it into this little white piece, and then again with our little mark that we've left, we're just going to take this bracket off here, and then we'll just line it up to where we had the mark before. Okay, we got that all hooked up. Again, same spot as it was before. So now what I'll do is take our choke lever here, and we're going to move that up and down, make sure that everything works, which it does. Okay, so we're over here on the right side of the machine. I got all my electronics plugged in, and then we've hooked up our positive to our starter, so I'm just going to tighten that up. Get some oil in this thing. We still got to bolt up the exhaust here, hook up the spark plug again. Okay, so we got the header bolts. I'm going to call that a header, right, because it comes right out of the cylinder head. So we got those 2 bolts tightened up. We still have to get the one at the bottom that bolts to the engine. Okay, so now that we got the drive belt on, the idler pulley on, everything's good. We got the engine bolted up now, fuel line hooked up, and choke cable. It's been a while since we worked on this thing. We've been really busy. We had a ATV that I had to fix up. Front end was all smashed in. I had to, you know, heat it up with the torch, weld, bend metal, and it was crazy. A lot of fabrication there. That video will be up in a while. And we had a 3-wheeler, big red 3-wheeler. That video should already be up, so you guys can check that out. And yeah, we ended up getting a plasma cutter too, so you guys can see, you know, it's been a while. We had to wait for the parts to get in, the belts, and then you know, this rider just got set off to the side while we were working on other stuff. But we got a plasma cutter now, which is sweet, so we can finish off the deck repair that we were doing. So you guys can see we got the bad piece cut out. This thing is just dickered, you know, that's all loose. We could have probably repaired that, but then, you know, you got thin metal up here to the point where, you know, if I welded it probably would have burnt right through and I would have just been wasting time. So now that we got the bad part cut out, well, we can go ahead and start patching it up. Here's the good deck, right, that had the bad piece. So we got that all cut out. And then this here was the bad deck, the one that was filled with Bondo, but we're going to be using the good piece from this. So basically pretty straightforward, just cut out the same exact piece, transfer that over to this deck, weld, 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 and then everything should be good. Also, this deck here was missing this little bracket, so we ended up just using a couple self-tappers to get it into position, and then I can go with the grinder and get it down to bare metal and then just tack that into position and lay a little bead in there so that it's nice and solid. You know, it's a little bit of work to you know, patch these decks. We shouldn't have probably paid what we paid for this. We picked this deck up for I think like $100. For the work that we got to do, probably wasn't that good of a deal, but it was covered with a bit of grass, so we never actually saw that the front of this was rotted. But the rest of the deck is mint condition. Everything's good to go. You know, we'll hit it up with some paint after we get all the fabrication and welding done. But the pulleys, all the bearings, the spindles, they're all good to go. Okay, so now that we got our plasma cutter all set up, we're going to be cutting out this part of the deck. So this is the bad part that we cut out of the good deck, and we're going to be cutting out a good piece out of the bad deck. I know it's a little confusing, but that's the way it has to be. because this deck, even though it looks solid, it's you know, 80-90% Bondo, except for the piece that we need, which is you know, just our luck, and that works out perfect for us. So again, this is our good deck here that we've already taken a substantial chunk out of using just an angle grinder, which was well, it took quite a long time to get that cut out. But over here you guys can see that off of this bracket, and that's what connects it to the front of your machine, we're 2 inches in from that bracket, so I'm going to make the cut the same on the other deck. Okay, so I've got my left and my right marked out here. I didn't mark the top end because when that piece here is on top of this, you know, you're sitting on top of this metal, so you're bringing it back farther. So what we'll do is we'll cut it longer if I have to, because I can always trim this piece to make it fit the other deck. Whereas if we cut it shorter, I won't be able to add material. And we got our left and right lines marked now. And if we come over here, we're just shy of the 2-inch mark. So to the right side of that soapstone mark is the 2-inch mark. So as long as I cut on that line, we should be good. Okay, so now that we have our ends cut, what I'm going to do is put this back in front there, and then I'm probably going to go maybe like an inch, maybe 1.5 inches out, draw myself just a rough estimate line, and then I'll just chop it off, and then we're going to use this piece on the good deck, and if we have to do any trimming, then we can trim, you know. But like I said, if I cut it shorter, like if I cut it down here, well, we have the other deck cut out up to here, right? So you always want to cut it longer and give yourself enough material so that you can always take material away. But adding material is a pain in the you know what. Okay, so using straight edge, I've measured 1 inch. So 1.5 inches would have been too much. That starts getting into the plate. And we're just starting to get into the area where, you know, this guy previous to us had repaired it with Bondo. So I'm not sure how the cut is going to be right here. So we might end up having to add a little piece of material right there. So just for this one little section, you guys can see it's all like rumpled and wavy. So that's because he's put Bondo down and then he's put, you know, some kind of like vinyl material or something on top of it, you know, to give it a little bit of strength, maybe fiberglass, who knows. So like I said, here's our piece. We've got our cuts left and right. I've measured up 1 inch from our line. So this is going to be the cut that I'm going to make right around that edge. And then again, just go straight down to my cuts. And yeah, then we'll take this piece off and fit it up to the other deck and see how good I did. Getting a little bit of flames here because some of that isn't metal. You know, we got a little bit of that fiberglass or Bondo, whatever it is, so I'm just going to keep cutting and see what happens. So the issue here is that I keep blowing a breaker because, you know, we got a small compressor and it's not meant to be running a long continuous load you know, for like air tools and especially plasma cutters. So the problem is that every time the air compressor kicks on, it's on the same you know, breaker that this is running off of. So not only are you drawing electricity from the plasma cutter, but you know, then the compressor kicks on and puts on such a heavy load that it just trips the breaker. So basically where I'm at now is that I got to cut, and then as soon as I hear the compressor come on, I got to wait however many minutes it takes for the compressor to fill back up, and then I maybe get 30 seconds of cutting. Okay, so that's cut out now. Here's our two pieces lined up. You guys can see I left the lip on the bottom of this one, even though the other one doesn't have it. And that's just because if I'm going to cut that off, I'll cut it off after we fit things up. But you guys can see we're close there, and we're super close there. That's like dead on. So I think this will turn out okay. So this deck here going into the scrap pile. And as for fitment, guys, check this out. We're pretty close here. I'd say that's like dead on. Same with this side over here. You know, once I get this lip on the bottom cut off, because you guys got to remember here that we're sitting on top of it, so you know, nothing's like perfectly lined up yet. But as soon as I figure out where to cut that bottom lip off of, this piece will slide in, and then I'll be able to measure up my top piece here, and I'll be able to trim off any excess material on our piece that we're swapping in, and I'll be able to tack this thing into position. If we got to hammer and bend any metal to you know, get it to fit a little tighter, then we'll do that at that time. But I think that's a job well done. Okay, so I got the welder set up here, and we've taken our piece and we're just starting to tack everything into position. So you guys can see we're just putting little tacks every now and then just to get things situated. You guys can see we're getting a couple little gaps there, but we got a trick to fill those gaps using a piece of copper in behind. You guys can see we got a gap there too that we're trying to work out using just a seat clamp and a couple more tacks just to get everything situated. But it's looking pretty good. Okay, and after tacking, we've gone along and just done a few little small beads, so you can see we're starting to build up as we go down. There's still a couple parts here where we're melting through because it's getting thin. So what we do is we use a piece of copper. Now, because copper is non-ferrous, the weld doesn't actually stick to it. So this is a good little trick. What you do is you take your piece of copper, you go up underneath your steel, you put this underneath it if there's a big gap to bridge. And what you do is, as you're going in here and welding, because the copper is underneath it, basically you can kind of bridge the gap, and your molten metal will actually sit on top of the copper and allow you to bridge a gap like this. So basically what we're doing is we're just trying to get some beads where we can, and then wherever we do have large gaps, we'll go underneath with this afterwards and fill in those holes. Now this is the underside of the mower deck. So once we get the underside completely welded and that there's no holes going through, what we'll do is we'll flip this up and weld the top side, and we'll already have all of those little gaps filled, so we'll be able to put a nice clean bead on the top edge. Well, we finally got this deck all welded up. It's in there solid now, so it's one complete piece. We have a few high spots here where you can see that we blew through, and we'll just take the grinder to that and clean it up a little bit. But you guys can see it's welded all the way through, one solid piece of metal now. And the fab work on this deck is pretty much done now, so what we're gonna do is take it out. We're gonna pressure wash it and clean it all up, and then the blades are already sharpened, so we'll end up hitting this after we wash it with some undercoating, and then we'll paint the top end with some Tremclad or some like Rust-Oleum black gloss paint, and this thing is ready to install onto the riding lawnmower. And then once we had the inside welded up, we came and welded solid on the outside all the way around. So this thing, like I said, is one piece of solid steel now, and this thing is ready to get cleaned up and painted. We also have a new deck belt that I have to find. You guys can see this one's just completely torn apart, so we got to replace that. We ordered one. I have it somewhere. I just got to find it. But we ended up getting the deck completely painted and undercoated. But if you'd like to see a video of how to undercoat a deck, click on the top right of your screen right now. You'll be able to see that popping up. And that link will take you to a video where we undercoat decks and I take you through just the steps of how to do it and the importance of why you should do it. But yeah, you guys can see this deck basically looks brand new. We've lubricated the underside of all the linkages and the pulleys, and you guys can see here's that section that we welded in. You know, from a couple feet away, you really don't even notice it. But the most important thing was the width of these two plates right here. This is what connects your deck to the hangers to the front of your machine, and this spacing is the same as it was with the old piece on there. So getting this piece here lined up and making sure that it was the same width in between, that was basically the most important thing. And before I go to get the deck on this thing, you guys can see the front wheels here. They are straight, but our steering wheel is to the right. I absolutely hate that, see? So that's lined up there, but then our wheels are to the left. So I'm gonna pop this little cap off here, and there should be a nut. Should be able to take that off, spin this wheel, and then we'll just straighten out that wheel a little bit. I don't know about you guys, but that kind of stuff bothers me. I don't know if it's OCD, obsessive compulsive, or what, but yeah, stuff like that just bugs the heck out of me. Okay, so you guys are gonna have a little Craftsman steering wheel cap on there, and just taking just a normal standard screwdriver, I went up and popped it out. And once you get this off, you're gonna have a big washer and a nut. If you guys leave your equipment outside, a lot of water can get in there, so that nut might be seized. So we just hit it with a little bit of PB Blaster, which is basically penetrating oil, and that loosened it up nice to the point where we can unscrew our nut and remove our washer. Now, we can see that right here, that's our main steering column, and that goes all the way down to the bottom, which connects to your tie rods right there, which control your wheels left and right. Now you guys can see that it's only slotted rectangular there, and basically you can only put this wheel one of two ways. Either this way, right, so it's aiming to the right when the wheels are straight, or when it's aiming left and the wheels are straight. So what you can do is separate this piece of aluminum inside, because it has more splines on the outside here, so that we can actually lift this wheel off, rotate it to the point we want, and then drop it back down, and it'll be perfectly straight. Now, if you guys hit this with some penetrating oil, you might get to the point where you pull your plastic piece off, and again, you guys can see there that it's splined just like that, and you'll be able to rotate it to the point where your wheel is straight and your tires are straight. But if that center aluminum piece doesn't come out, I'll show you how to get it out. So what you want to do is grab yourself a socket, the biggest as possible, and then get yourself a soft blow hammer, and basically just tap it with a little bit of penetrating oil, because you guys want to make sure that you don't crack your steering wheel, right, the plastic, and this should just fall right out. Now, I'm not going to tighten this back up, because we're probably going to end up taking a Scotch pad to this, roughing it up a little bit, and then hitting it with some black Krylon spray paint just to make it look a little nicer. And we do use Krylon because it adheres to plastic a lot better than normal spray paint does. But basically, you guys can see that for the short amount of time that it took to do that, the wheel is a lot straighter, and I think it just physically looks a lot better. Okay, and before I lay the deck under here, I wanted to hook up the new deck belt, so I'm going to wrap that around. Okay, so I got my brand new belt all routed through, so this is what it should look like. You guys should have it coming through here. We have our keepers here and here. So we got the belt on the inside of that, coming around, wrapping up to this pulley, going through here underneath this. So you guys are going to want to disconnect your cotter pin at the back there, and then you'll be able to pull that bar out and run your belt through, and then hook it back up after, and then it comes through up around here, and it just popped off of there. But this is how your belt goes. Now, any cotter pins that you may have, guys, you want to put them towards the front of your machine if at all possible. Basically, what that does is if you have a stick or something, or any kind of brush that's going in here that's going to hit something, you don't want it to catch the back side of the cotter pin. So if something hits this, it's going to push it in even farther than what it is now. But if this was spun around so that these parts right here were facing towards the front, and a stick comes in and hits this, it could actually pop that cotter pin out. Now, the way a mower deck works is pretty simple. You have your routing here and you have your idler pulley. All of these other pulleys here are fixed, and this is the only one that moves. Now on our machine here, we have what's known as a blade engage lever. So when you push this up into that position, it's going to move a lever down below, which this arm right here hooks up to. So imagine your lever on your machine was pushed forward. This pulley is pushed in to put tension on this belt. And then when you go to release that arm and pull it back, this comes forward. And you guys can see right now that our brake pad here is pulled away from the pulley so that both bladed pulleys, right? So these pulleys here are the ones that the blades hook up to. They can both spin freely right now. But when you go to disengage your machine and this pulls forward, you guys can see that this pulley comes out to put slack on your belt now, and our brake pads push in to stop our bladed pulleys from spinning. So that's what slows your blades down once you disengage your blade lever. And we removed our plastic little chute here just for painting purposes, but it makes it harder to lay next to the machine when these are on and you're installing the deck. So I just left it off for now, and we'll put that back on once this deck is installed. Now you guys see this bracket right there that's hanging down from our machine. We can see that that bracket is on the left side of the machine here. Now that bracket corresponds to this stabilizing bar right here. So as you guys can see, it's hanging to the right side. So what you're going to want to do is flip this and leave it over to the left side of the machine. Obviously this is going to be flipped, right? So this side is going to correspond to that side of the mower. But basically, once you get this underneath and you start hooking stuff up, if this is over there, well, then you're going to have to remove the bolt, and that's just a pain. So just flip it and keep an eye on that. Make sure it's in the right position before you lift your deck and put it under your machine. Okay, so I got the deck laid up underneath the machine. First thing I'm going to do is take that belt and wrap it around our pulley. Okay, so I'm running into a slight problem here. So we put the same length belt on that came off the old deck, right? So this is a new deck with the good piece from the old deck. So this is a different deck, even though it's slightly the same. All the pulleys, when we measured all the pulleys, they're the same. And when we measured the old belt to buy this new belt, that's all the same. So the length of the belt is identical. The problem I'm having right now is that the belt is starting to tighten up and the deck needs to move back another 3 inches, and we just can't get it. Because 3 inches back doesn't necessarily correlate to an extra 3 inches of belt length, right? Because the belt is circular, so you're getting an extra 3 inches. That doesn't mean that an extra 3 inches of belt here will bring this entire deck back 3 inches. So we're going to have to play around with it. Pull this out, put a different belt on, slide this up underneath, hook it all up, and just check to make sure that our length is good. So we tried to run the 87. Obviously that didn't work, so we took that off. And we're at the point now where we've tried a 91, which was too short, and we tried a 97, which was too long. So basically we're somewhere in between there. Well, we got the steering wheel all painted up now, so that's the difference. You guys can see, you know, it just makes it look a little nicer there with the black paint, and now that it's straightened out, I think it looks a lot better. We got some tire shine onto the tires, and we finally got our belt in. So the only reason we ended up buying an 87-inch belt was because that's the belt that was laying on top of the old deck when this was delivered to us. So basically we just assumed that that's the belt that it came with, but it might have just been a spare belt that someone had thrown on top of the deck, and you know, we never thought any different. But now we have an 87-inch belt that we can just keep for you know, something else in our inventory there. But we ended up using a 95.5-inch belt. So we just got another shipment from Stens today and finally got this thing done. And this thing looks awesome. The only thing we're missing is the little front headlight piece there, but I don't think it looks that bad without it. If we can find it, then we'll get it. but if you guys remember, we did disconnect the lights, so they don't work anyways. So realistically, our customer won't even need them. We got the side plastic chute there installed with the pin and the spring. And like I said, we hit this with a little bit of tire shine. I think it turned out great. Now we got an old seat on there right now, but if our customer wants, we can swap a seat. We got all kinds of newer seats in the back shed there that we can go through and see what fits and get that on there for him if he wants. But basically this thing is done and ready to deliver to our customer. Well, here it is. I'll get a shot of it firing up for you guys so you can hear how it sounds after we did the carb clean, oil change, sump gasket replacement, everything that we've done to it. Brand new deck basically, fully restored. So that's it for this Craftsman riding lawnmower revival. If you guys enjoyed the video, think about leaving us a thumbs up. You can click here to subscribe, and you can click here to watch one of my previous videos. I upload every week, guys, so be sure to come on back and check the channel out next week for what we got new. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.